I've got a single shot pump action automatic double semi-artillery. I got a new thing of sawed-off under quickest, all things you've never seen. I'm gonna take the form of a heavy metal stormy coming after me, 'cause I got the right to defend what's mine in the face of tyranny.
On today's gun show, we're going to do a 9mm comparison of Federal 115 grain, Federal 124 grain, and Federal 147 grain. The test pistols are going to be a Springfield Echelon, a Springfield Garrison 1911, a Glock 19, and the one that started it all, a Luger P08. The 9mm round, also known as the 9mm Luger, the 9mm Para, the 9mm Parabellum, and the 9mm NATO, was designed by George Luger for his then new, in 1901, Luger pistol. The original round was a 124 grain, but before World War II, it was switched to a 115 grain. But now we have 115 grain, 124 grain, and 147 grain, with the 115 grain being the most popular at the shooting range. The term 9mm Parabellum comes from the Latin term Si vis pacem parabellum, if you want peace, prepare for war, which was the Deutsche Waffen Munitionfabriken's motto, which created the 9mm Luger. And the 9mm round. The popularity of the 9mm round started growing after World War II. And by the late 1980s and early 1990s, it was growing in popularity in the United States, going to surpass the .45 ACP. Now in 2025, it is the most popular handgun cartridge in the world. The 124 grain full metal jacket is the choice of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which has 32 countries as members. And the reason they use the 124 grain full metal jacket round nose is because gentlemen don't shoot each other with hollow points. Even our beloved 1911s that have been called .45s forever are chambered in 9mm. Bill Wilson said there are more 1911s chambered in 9mm now than .45 ACP. With modern powders and bullet design, like this hollow point right here, 9mm is a great round. It has mild recoil and reasonable stopping power. Most people can train with it defensively with no issues. Shooter ready?
Ready.
Threat. So accuracy was tested offhand with 4 different pistols and 3 different grain weights. I didn't put it on sandbags. I just tested offhand because nobody trains on sandbags. The unfortunate thing was I was staring into the sun at the time period that I was doing these tests, but I have it on paper, and I'll do a B-roll here to show you the offhand accuracy of just 15 yards, slowly pulling the trigger every time the sights dropped onto paper. Springfield Echelon 115 grain, 15 yards. Echelon 124 grain, 15 yards. Echelon 147 grain, 15 yards. So with the Springfield Echelon offhand at 15 yards, the 115 grain was about a 7-inch group. The 124 grain was about a 5-inch group, and the 147 grain was about a 3.5 to 4.5 inch group. Glock 19, 115 grain, 15 yards. Glock 19, 124 grain, 15 yards. Glock 19, 147 grain at 15 yards. The Glock 19, 15 yards offhand. The 115 grain was about a 4.5 inch group. The 124 grain was about a 4-inch group with one flyer at 8 inches. and the 147 grain was about a 5-inch group. Springfield Garrison 115 grain at 15 yards. Springfield Garrison 124 grain at 15 yards. Springfield Garrison 147 grain at 15 yards. With the Springfield Garrison at 15 yards offhand, the 115 grain was about a 5.5-inch group high. The 124 grain is about a 6-inch group high. The 147 grain is about a 7-inch group, but most of it grouping within about 4 inches high. Luger P08, the original, 115 grain at 15 yards. Luger P08, 124 grain at 15 yards. Luger P08, 147 grain, 15 yards. The 1922 Luger P08 at 15 yards offhand. The 115 grain was about a 5-inch group. The 124 grain was about a 4-inch group. And the 147 grain was about a 4-inch group. So the 9mm Luger produced the best groups with the 9mm ammo that it was designed for it. I also used all 4 pistols with the 3 different grain weights to see what the felt recoil difference would be. Springfield Echelon 115 grain. Springfield Echelon 124. Springfield Echelon 147 grain. Glock 19 115 grain. Glock 19 124 grain. Glock 19 147 grain. Springfield Garrison 115 grain. Springfield Garrison 124. Springfield Garrison 147. Luger 115 grain. Luger 124. Luger 147. An FBI gel block, it doesn't matter what grain the 9mm ammo is. 115, 124, 147, it punches all the way through. And 115 grain through a ballistic gel block at 7 yards. straight through. Little cavitation. Little cavitation. But straight through. 124 grain through a ballistics gel block at 7 yards. Same result. A little more open. A little more cavitation on the back. I'm going to try to not hit the same hole in the third round. Just about punch the same hole there. 147 grain at 7 yards. So I was able to miss the other 2 holes and shoot lower. The 147 grain barely leaves any cavitation. Just punches right through. You can actually see the spiral where the bullet went through. Hiding behind a door at your house will not stop a bullet. The bullets go right through the door and right through you. It also works in reverse. You need to know your target and what's beyond. You shoot intended bad guy, you need to know what's behind it because the bullet will go through the bad guy and still through the wall in your house. Through the bad guy, through the wall in your house. The only thing that will stop inside an FBI block is a hollow point. So this is what you need to be running for your defensive ammo so it doesn't go all the way through the bad guy into a good guy. So for a comparison, using defensive ammunition, Hornady 124 grain XTP hollow point, we'll put that through the block and show you how it slows down inside a body cavity. And as you can see, specific expanding defensive ammo will stop in the bad guy's body, about a foot in. So I did a test on 3 concrete blocks with the 3 different grain weights. 115 grain. 124 grain. 147 grain. 115 grain expanded the most, of course, and dumped most of its lead, but the block came apart. The 124 grain punched a hole and stopped on the second wall. Of course, the 115 stopped on the second wall. The 147 grain punched a smaller hole, retained most of its lead, but it stopped on the back wall. None of them went all the way through, but after a few rounds, I think that it would have shot through the concrete blocks. So I cleaned up the area and moved these to the back of the truck to see this a little clearer. As you can see, the 115 grain had the most expansion and had the most damage. The 124 grain hole was still large, but didn't blow apart the block. Had medium expansion, of course. And the 147 grain punched the smallest hole, went right through cleanly, and had the least expansion. But even though all three made it through the first layer of concrete block, they did not penetrate through the backside. So in conclusion on the 9mm ammo test, price-wise, the 115 grain, of course, is going to be the cheapest. The 124 grain's only about $1 more. The 147 grain's about $2 more than the 115 grain. You can buy the 115 grain in bulk, that's why it's probably the most popular. But I feel like the 147 grain is probably the winner out of all this, or the 124. They're closely matched there. I don't feel like the 115 grain, even though it is the cheapest and you can buy it in the most bulk, it's harder to find the 124s and the 147s. The 147s definitely, the 147 would be the winner out of this. The Echelon liked it best, the Garrison liked it best, and the Luger liked it best. The Glock 19 liked the 115 grain and the 124 grain best. But return to your sight picture, the 147 grain wins out on that. Drops right back in, I feel like, a lot quicker due to it probably only leaving the barrel at 1,000 foot per second. So with all that being said, leave me a comment down below what pistol and ammo you use at the range. And also tell me what is your favorite self-defense ammo. Because that's all I've got for you today on this gun show. So remember to eat right, exercise, and go do some training. And remember, part of that training needs to be dry fire at home with an empty gun. Get those reps in at the house so when you're ready to go to the range, you've had plenty of practice. That's all I've got for you on today's gun show. Thanks for watching.